doing? Welcome back to Honest About the Irish, brought to you by yours truly, B-Man is Mad. So we are 2 days away from the Rose Bowl played in Dallas, Texas. Actually, it is the only second time the Rose Bowl has not been played in California, out in the left coast. Back in 1942, the Rose Bowl was played in Durham, North Carolina, because during that time we were in World War II, and the federal government was afraid of huge gatherings in stadiums and events in the West Coast because of a fear of that the Japanese Empire would invade the U.S. So they moved the Rose Bowl to Durham, North Carolina, and like I said, the second time in history that the Rose Bowl has been played not in California, in the left coast. Now, let's get into it, folks, and you know how this is going to go. You know how I am. You know what I'm going to be. I'm going to be Mr. Negative Nancy. I'm going to be straightforward. You're going to think I'm too angry or pessimistic, but that's fine. As long as you're watching, leave a comment, like this, subscribe to me. Even if you hate Notre Dame, I'd really appreciate it. But all week, I've listened to it. I've listened to the naysayers. I have listened to ESPN radio. I've watched ESPN television. I've taken notes down. I've listened to the morning shows. And of course, you know I hate ESPN, but I have to listen to the national syndicate radio stations out there so I know what they're saying. And it's predictable because they hate Notre Dame and they always have hated Notre Dame. And the same argument always comes up after Notre Dame pooped their pants against Trevor Lawrence and Clemson 2 weeks ago from Saturday in the ACC championship game, which I have not got over yet. But, you know, it's weird how that works when you predict your team and you have a feeling that your team's going to lose by a lot of points, and they do, and you're still pissed off. It's kind of like the feeling when you know your girlfriend or you know your wife is cheating on you, but when you actually catch her in the act, it just hurts. That's how Notre Dame felt with me against the ACC championship game against Clemson, when I already knew they were going to get blown out against Clemson, but just the pain of how it happened, just the pain of physically seeing the game happening, just that pain in the gut feeling, being stabbed in the gut, is absolutely devastating. And because of that game, because of that reaction, the way that Notre Dame played, and by the way, I don't care what anyone says, Notre Dame left 13 points off the board. Notre Dame could have easily been up in that game 13-0, and there could have been a momentum swing when Avery Johnson dropped that pass. Avery Davis, I believe his name is, dropped that pass from Ian Book. That was the momentum swinger of the game, because that was the ensuing drive right after the interception that Trevor Lawrence had thrown, and Notre Dame could have been up at that point at least 10-0, and they had missed a field goal before that. So, listen, I get it. I know what the naysayers are saying. I know what the negativity is about Notre Dame. Now, the same argument is that I've listened to the last 17 years is that, Notre Dame can't beat an elite team. An elite team. Notre Dame can't beat a superior team. They cannot contend with teams like Alabama. They cannot contend with a fully healthy team like Clemson. But they're there. Notre Dame made it. They made it. I'm not going to say, I'm just happy they made it, but they made it. Notre Dame is a top 5 team. They could play with anyone in the country, probably not Alabama, and probably not a fully healthy Clemson team that we saw. Why? Because they are at a different level than Notre Dame. And I've been saying this, but it was nice to see Notre Dame beat a number 1 team earlier in the year. Yes, I know there was no Trevor Lawrence. Yes, I know that Clemson was missing 4 other players. Yes, I know that Notre Dame was able to contain their key players. Of course, that the big, and I'm going to say this 100 times, the big factor, the big difference is Trevor Lawrence's athleticism was not in the first game, and it was in the second game, and we clearly saw that Notre Dame was exposed defensively, and also Ian Book was exposed because he didn't have anyone to throw to. Notre Dame doesn't not have a lot of depth in receiving. Notre Dame was forced out of the pocket. Ian Book was forced out of the pocket, and he was held vulnerable. And there was a lot of red flags you saw in that game against a fully healthy team, as in Clemson. And why is that? Well, simple. Like I said earlier, Clemson is a far superior team than Notre Dame when they are 100% healthy. Now, Notre Dame had their chances, like I said. Notre Dame was competing with them in the first quarter and a half when it was 3-0. It could have been 10-0. It could have been 13-0, but could have, should have, would have, doesn't equal results. It doesn't equal facts. They lost the game. They were blown out. But I'm saying that they did have a slight chance there in the early first half. Now, I've gotten up every morning. I've made my coffee. I've eaten my Pop-Tarts. I've gone to work. I've listened to the radio in my truck, and I've heard the negativity, and I've heard the naysayers, and I've come to accept it. I have come to accept that Notre Dame is not in the same level as Alabama. Alabama is a juggernaut. Alabama, how am I going to do this? How am I going to use analogies here? Because you know I love using movie analogies, okay? Because I am a complete 80s dork. I love movies from the 80s. I love Star Wars. I love the Rocky films. I love Big Trouble in Little China. Now, what analogy should I use this game for? Let's see. Rocky 4, simple. Rocky 4 is one of the most underrated movies in history. Rocky 4 was made during the time of the Cold War. Rocky 4 was made during the time where we had the great President Reagan in office, and it was towards the beginning of the end of the Cold War. But actually, Rocky should have got the real credit for the Cold War ending. Of course, I'm joking because we all know Rocky's not real. I've got to let people know that so they don't think I'm mentally ill. Okay, so Rocky 4, the beginning of Rocky 4 was, right now, Notre Dame's Apollo Creed. Notre Dame is happy. They had a great year. You know, they're not old and retired like Apollo Creed was in Rocky 4, but I just think that Notre Dame feels good to be in this position. And I think that Notre Dame feels good that they're going to be playing in the spotlight game again and being able to have a chance to play for the national championship game, okay? I think they are taking Alabama serious. Apollo Creed did not take, as I hit the mic there, Apollo Creed did not take Ivan Drago serious. He thought it was us versus them. He thought it was going to be a scrimmage fight. He just wanted to have fun. We all know how Apollo Creed was. Apollo Creed was a showboat. He was fun. He was great. He's one of my movie characters of all time. Now, what happened when Apollo Creed got in the ring with Ivan Drago? Whatever he hits, he destroys. It's simple. He destroyed Apollo Creed. He completely devoured him. It was nothing. I mean, it's basically like if I got in the ring with Brock Lesnar. By the way, I would love to get in the ring with Brock Lesnar, okay? That would be freaking great. If I am the only person in the world that would take an F5 from Brock Lesnar. And if Brock Lesnar, somehow, if you're watching this, Paul Heyman, if you're watching this, arrange it. Have Brock Lesnar come on my channel and F5 me through this desk. I love it. Okay, that's basically what Notre Dame's going up against. They were going up a superpower. They were going up against a 5-star recruiting class. They have over 15 5-star players on that team. I believe Notre Dame has 2. I think Notre Dame has 2 or 3. Now, you Notre Dame Google factors out there, please correct me in the comments below me, I should say, and prove me wrong. But that's the analogy I'm using. This movie is going to be like Rocky 4. Now, I hope I'm wrong. And the only way that Notre Dame can compete against Alabama in the Rose Bowl played in Dallas, Texas, not out in the left coast. The only way that Notre Dame can win this game or even compete is if they have a flawless game, 99.9%, because there's no such thing as perfect, because if things were perfect, I would be. And we all know B-Man is not perfect. Alabama would have to make mistakes. Alabama would have to have turnovers. But you know what? Alabama is the team that if you score 62 points on them, they'll score 64. That's how great Alabama is. If Alabama has 3 interceptions, your team will have 5. They always find ways to win. They always find ways to come over adversity. They just always find ways, no matter what. If Notre Dame scores 80 points, Alabama will score 82. This isn't going to be a game where Notre Dame surprised everybody. Of course, they're almost a 3-touchdown underdog where Notre Dame wins by 10 points. Now, that would be crazy. That ain't going to happen, folks, because this is going to be like Rocky 4. Now, which Rocky 4 are we going to get? Are we going to get the Ivan Drago when he completely destroyed Apollo Creed? Or are we going to get when Rocky when Rocky had no choice, had no chance, when the critics said Rocky was washed up, when the critics said that Rocky should have stayed in retirement, when Rocky actually had to go to Moscow. By the way, Rocky 4 was filmed in Colorado, in case you didn't know that. When I found out, I was shocked by that, because I actually thought that they went to Moscow and filmed Rocky 4. But when Rocky went to Moscow, everyone doubted it. Even his own wife, Adrian, told Rocky, "You can't win." And what happened? What did Rocky do? He came over all the odds. He came over all the critics. He came over what his own wife said. He came over all the obstacles that were held against him in front of him. And he beat the Juggernaut. He beat the invincible not Apollo Creed. He died. Ivan Drago. And he made the famous speech, "If I can change and you can change, we all can change." I'd probably butch that. That's not what he said, but you get my drift, okay? I should have probably researched Rocky 4 quotes before I went live here. But is that what we're going to get? Are we going to get the first fight where it's over in the first quarter? Or are we going to get the second fight where Notre Dame hangs in there and then they cut the Russian, they cut Alabama, Alabama starts to bleed. You see, Alabama is human. They're not a machine. Are we going to get that? We'll have to see. And listen, I want to be pessimistic, I want to be positive, but I'm going to come off a little too pessimistic here, folks. I honestly see no way Notre Dame winning this game, and I know a lot of Notre Dame fans out there right now saying, "You're not a Notre Dame fan. You're too negative." Notre Dame's not there yet, folks. I'm sorry. They're not there yet. I know, listen, I've probably contradicted myself on this channel, and I'm probably going to be pissed off on Friday, even though I know they're going to lose, even though I know, like the analogy that your girlfriend's cheating on you, or if your boyfriend's cheating on you, but when you catch them in the act, it hurts. I know I'm going to be in a bad mood on Friday. And you're like, "Well, why are you in a bad mood? You predicted this." Because you do not like seeing your team get their brains blown out or beat in on national television. And then you got to listen to the critics for the next 6 months before college football starts and during the spring training, or the spring practices at the blue and gold game. You're going to have to hear all summer how Notre Dame doesn't belong with the elites. Listen, Notre Dame is a top 5 team in the country. Notre Dame could probably compete with every college football team in the country except for 2 teams, maybe 3. Okay, they can beat Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State is not a Clemson. Ohio State is not a Alabama, and I really hope Clemson blows out Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, because I am really getting tired of the Big Ten. And the Big Ten is like an annoying fly you just want to swat and you can't get to it. That is, of course, the Sugar Bowl played in New Orleans. Now, I'm not going to give a final prediction, a final score. I honestly think that Notre Dame has no chance, like I said. But then again, it could be like Rocky 4 in the second fight. I could be proven wrong, and I got to come on here and own it. But like I said, I am completely honest. I love Notre Dame, guys. I just don't think Notre Dame's there yet. It's very, very difficult to recruit at Notre Dame, and I have said this 100 times. It is very, very, very to get kids to come to South Bend. It is very, very hard to get that kind of talent, and also Notre Dame has their academic restrictions. We also hear that. It's like beating a dead horse. You get annoyed with that, but it is what it is. I am glad that Notre Dame's here. Notre Dame had a decent year. Notre Dame had a great year, okay? They finished the year, regular season, undefeated. Now, if they lose this game by 4 points or 5 points, yes, it'll be heartbreaking if it's close. But they lose 49-0, which a lot of people are predicting, and including myself. But I'm not going to put that in concrete proof for you guys and come out and completely admit it. But it does not look pretty. So, what should Notre Dame fans do? What is my advice to other Notre Dame fans out there? Now, the elitist Notre Dame fans who probably clicked off right now, who hate me because they don't think I'm a fan, and that's fine. But I am just a different type of fan. My advice to you is, we have nothing to give up. We have nothing to lose. I mean, what else do we have to lose? Alabama has more to lose than Notre Dame does. And yes, I use that word "we." I apologize. I hate saying that. Kind of like how Rocky was. Rocky was going to give up his life in Rocky 4 to fight Drago as long as he took him down with him. Now, Notre Dame is not literally going to give their life to Alabama, but they need to have that analogy. They need to say, F it. We've got nothing to lose. We're going to go out there and play our hardest, and maybe we will knock down the Giant. Maybe we will cut the Russian. Maybe we will cut Alabama. And you see, Alabama is a man. They are not a machine. Maybe that's the mentality Brian Kelly will have for the game. Now, it's a little far-fetched. It's a little ridiculous because I use these movie analogies, but that's the way I look at it. And, folks, I hope I'm wrong. I really do. And my other advice to Notre Dame fans is just I wouldn't say be happy that we're here because you always want to win. Don't settle. Don't be like, well, we got this far, even though we don't belong here because of the Clemson game. We shouldn't even be here. Then why watch the game? I've heard fans tell me that too. I've had fans actually text me that, and friends tell me that who are Notre Dame fans. Then you're a defeatist. Don't watch the game, and you're probably calling me a defeatist because of my analogies with Rocky IV. Okay, but however, don't go in thinking to this, oh, it was a great season. Oh, we got this far. That's it. No. Only teams like the Buffalo Bills, only teams like the Cleveland Browns who haven't been there in a while, who haven't had their chance, have that feeling. Okay, you see it with teams who haven't been to the playoffs in so many years. They get kind of far. They get to the championship series or whatever they call it, and they crap their pants by the superior team. Kind of like what Notre Dame might do this weekend against Alabama. Those teams haven't been there before. Notre Dame has been there. They went to the national championship game in 2012, and of course, don't remind me, that was a complete embarrassment. And of course, they got blown out by Clemson in 2018 in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl in the semifinal, which they are in this year. Same scenario, Dallas, Texas, but it's not the Cotton Bowl. Of course, it is the Rose Bowl. So Notre Dame has been there in the last 10 years at least. They've been on the stage. They've been in that opportunity. So just think that whatever happens for a reason. Now, if Notre Dame does get blown out 52-0, and it's predicted, the loss is predicted like everyone else said, then we know that Notre Dame, we as not Notre Dame, but fans know that Notre Dame cannot compete with the teams like Alabama because we all know how Alabama is, and we all know how big of a juggernaut they are, and we know how powerful they are, and how Ivan Drago was. Now, if they win, then it's a miracle. If they win, it's Notre Dame had come over the obstacles. It was like Rocky, okay, in the fourth film when he defeats Drago. No one predicted it. Even his own wife said he was going to lose. That's how it's going to be looked at when if Notre Dame were to beat Alabama in that game on Friday in Dallas, Texas. If Notre Dame loses by 4, then Notre Dame can compete against teams like Alabama. But then, of course, how's the media going to react to it? If Notre Dame loses, let's say 44-40 or 54-50, because put it this way, if Notre Dame is close in this game, or if Notre Dame wins, it's going to be a high-scoring game. Okay, and the problem I have with that, like I said earlier, Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of depth in receiving. So Notre Dame has a lot to work with here. And Alabama knows, and Nick Saban's a smart guy. He's probably one of the greatest coaches in college football. He's going to know how to escape Ian Book. He's going to know how to collapse the pocket and have coverage sacks on Ian Book. So it's a difficult task. It is a hard task. But no matter what the situation is, there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. Now, hopefully, it's not one-sided. Hopefully, it is a 4-point game. That's what I would love to see. If Notre Dame wins the game, like I said, 54-50 or 44-40, that would be great. But we do know that it's going to be a high-scoring game. And like I said, the problem is that Notre Dame does not have a lot of talent depth in their receiving core. So Notre Dame might have to be one-sided, or whatever they call it, one-dimensional, and hopefully they exploit a weakness in Alabama, which is not very likely. Folks, that is pretty much it today on the game.